So somebody just entered on a phone. Can you let us know who that is?
That's me. That's me.
You, okay.
That's Charmaine.
Just in case you can't hear me. Can you hear me okay? Otherwise, I'll hang up.
No, we can hear you fine.
Okay, so I'll hang up.
All right, you want to
Hello.
test that again? We can still hear you.
Okay. You're still, so I don't know. And so is Miss Kelly and Miss Ward. So I feel like I'm the only one moving.
You're kind of frozen. You must have an unstable connection or something.
Yeah, I'm squatting, if you will, in a conference room because I have back-to-back meetings.
Hmm.
There weren't any minutes from prior meetings attached to this. I couldn't find them.
Really? I have them on the back side of the agenda.
I didn't get an agenda. And
What did you get?
just this,
The financials?
just the financials, yeah. And I don't even see it online.
Kathy, did you get the agenda?
Yep. I just printed it all off tonight.
Susanna, you did too. Was it sent to you directly or did you find it online?
I got it
I
on.
found it online.
Good.
Martha, would you like me to email it to you?
I can look further. But I don't even see on the agendas, I don't even, let's see, let me look for financial committee. Word Ed. That's okay. I mean, I just,
Martha, I'm going to forward you the email that said that the item had been posted. That was on Friday.
wait, and okay, I'm coming up with finance committee. I've got the site, but March 9th. Okay, I have it.
Okay, great. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 5:32 p.m. This is the Finance Committee meeting of the Manchester Board of Education. I'm Kathy Ward, Board Chair. I'm joined with Susanna Everett and Martha Kelly from the board and Superintendent Lyman and Finance Director Charmaine Bradshaw-Hill. So our first item of business is approval of the minutes of November 12th. Martha, do you want to take a minute to?
Yeah, I was just I just pulled it up and I was just looking at it.
Take your time.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's yeah, I get I know it mentions in there about the transportation contract, and maybe we could see how that went this time. see how that was finally worked out. Thank you. But yes, so it's everything's there.
Okay, great. So may I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes for the November 12 meeting.
Thank you, Martha.
I will second that.
Thank you. Any objections to approving these minutes? All right, minutes are approved. I don't believe we received any comments from the public.
No.
Okay, thank you. So additions to present agenda. Martha, would you like to include the transportation?
Yeah, I'd just like to see how that contract worked out. Just discuss that, please.
Are we good with that?
Yep, we're good with that.
So we can do that after Charmaine goes over the quarterly financials. Is that okay with everyone?
Sure.
Okay, great. So why don't we just jump to the financials for the period ending 12/31/19?
Hopefully everyone has the quarterly financial packet for that ends the quarter December 31st, 2020. And no one's moving on my screen, and I'm someone who interacts with facial expressions. So if you just stop me verbally as I go along, then I'll know that you have questions. Otherwise, I won't know that there's a concern or a question. And
Did you say this is for the first half of the year, right? Till December, the first half of the fiscal year? I thought you said quarter.
it's a quarter. It's the second quarter.
Oh, it's only
The first quarter.
It's not cumulative.
Yes, it is.
Okay. So it's from July to December, 6 months.
So it's quarterly, which the sum totals that are in the documents they're cumulative, but this is the effect of what transpired after September 30th.
Okay.
So this is October, November, and December's impact on your financials
Okay. Thank you.
on top of what happened as of September 30th. Okay. So overall, I'm sorry.
Oh, that we reviewed in our last meeting.
Correct. Okay. So the financials, the quarterly financials, again, it may sound like a broken record, but I think things are going to start to look a little bit differently once we, get into the third quarter, because again, you have some things are seasonal or cyclical as it relates to revenues and expenditures. And so the first half of the year is panning out the way it had been expected, even during this particular pandemic. Because if you notice in your actual detailed summaries or your summaries in the back of the quarterly, you'll see specific areas that speak to COVID-related expenditures. All other expenditures pretty much are on par outside of those that are directly related to the pandemic. And so for the most part, as I say that most things are on par, the only areas of concern, which is still directly related to the pandemic, is basically the Cafeteria Fund. So I'm actually going through that memo, that first memo or first page of the quarterly financials that kind of spike out the areas of consideration quarter after quarter. You'll notice that the general fund revenues, we didn't get any additional monies in the second quarter because it's the third quarter where we'll get another infusion of cash from the state for the education cost share grant. And it was already reported from the previous quarter that ended September 30th. So it'll show up for the January payment when we do our third quarter review, for April. The third quarter review, this is March, I've got my months off. Yeah, April at the end of April. I'm a little bit behind because we've been between the budget season and transitioning our new financial management system. We couldn't actually get this quarterly review in February, so we're doing it as soon as possibly available for everyone's schedule. So again, the general fund revenues are on par. We're not looking at anything surprising there. Board of Expenditures are, again, on par. Special education is, again, in a good place. There's nothing blipping on the radar, if you will. Plus, you already have a very healthy fund balance to support your special education expenditures that may or may not have been budgeted for over and above what's in the operating budget. So then we come to Cafeteria Fund. That's your food service fund. Okay, and I think we talked about that briefly in previous meetings, where that fund is concerning, and it's concerning across the country, not just for MBOE or the state of Connecticut, but the expenditures as of December 31st exceeded your revenues by $204,000 for that period. So the fund balance for July 1st was $136,000. So now it's 67. So the cushion that we had when we started the fiscal year has now been used to compensate for those shortfalls. Okay, as of December 31st, so we're in the negative about $70,000. But it's not all negative. The State Department of Education is actually working, you know, because they've heard the cries of my counterparts, again, not just in the state of Connecticut, but across the country. The CSDE has, I think, been kind of waiting and hoping and banking on federal support for these child nutrition programs. And it's sort of a double-edged sword because we went from, you know, self-supporting food service fund, food service system and Mansfield to being completely reliant on claims. And again, it's because of the pandemic. So new relief funds are coming down the pike, and consideration for, because what was originally sort of the litmus test is the state and the Fed would not support shortfalls in operations that were due to lack of revenue, which I thought was insane, but okay. So now that we've had CRF and ESSER1 and all these other things coming down the pike, and they have consistently overlooked this particular shortfall, they are now paying attention to those cries. So there have been communications that I've been receiving that it's being considered. There's some relief packages that give way to some very broad language. I've been in discussions with my colleagues across CASBO, Connecticut Association of School Business Officials, and we're going to take that broad language and run with it, meaning we're going to apply that language against the actual labor costs, because that's what's been hurting most districts, is they get a reimbursable price for meals. They charge the paper products and all that other stuff that's associated with packaging the meals in a COVID environment for children to have breakfast and lunch. Some districts Monday through Friday, other districts Sunday through Saturday. And all those things are able to be applied against previous federal relief funds, but not the labor. So we're going to now stretch that broad eligibility standard that they've now provided. I think, Kelly, correct me if I'm wrong, in like the last 2 weeks or so, 2 to 3 weeks, and we're going to start to see how we can push those labor costs through those relief funds.
So, Charmaine,
So it's not all doom and gloom.
Charmaine, it sounds like you're confident this is going to happen, but is it really going to happen? Because this is not sustainable, correct?
Oh, it's not sustainable. And forgive me, it's not confidence, it's faith and hope that I'm standing on, because we're not alone. There's faith and hope that there's so much pressure that CASBO and some other organizations within the state, like the superintendent's organizations, are applying pressure in such a way that they have to give us something. And I think they kind of threw us that option because they didn't get any additional relief funds from the Fed. So we're just going to leverage it. Literally, that's kind of the scuttle that went back and forth with CASBO, because if we all operate with the same expectation and interpretation of that guideline or that guidance, then we're all in it together. It's almost like not being able to pick us off one at a time. They have to go after the entire CASBO association.
But do we have to have a plan just in case? No?
So the conference, again, relief monies are coming consistent. I don't want to say consistently, but there's like new information, the legislation, the what's happening at the federal levels with the bill that's presently being debated is hopefully it passes the Senate and it gets signed, and within a couple of weeks from there, they'll do the allocations for the respective communities in the state of Connecticut. There's already folks who are crunching numbers based off of the current package that is being debated in the Senate, that they've already done an estimate of what additional funds will be coming to respective communities, not school districts as well as municipalities. So when you ask me about my level of confidence, it's again, faith and hope based off of the fact that this is not sustainable and that there are actually bills that are being reviewed now, and our state legislature has been, at the ready so that they can distill the information that based off of an allocation to the state of Connecticut, distill that information down to the respective municipalities and school districts. So I'm hopeful. And when you ask about a plan B, the plan B would be to ask the Fed for forgiveness. Plan C is to figure out how we're going to reallocate operating funds to fill the gap.
Okay.
I have a
Charlene,
question.
Can I just jump in there and just remind people also that our expenses include the expenses for the food service program at E.O. Smith. And we have already talked to E.O. Smith about the possibility that should we end up having to use any of our operating funds to support this, that we would need appropriately to assess them some of this as well.
And to piggyback off of what Kelly said, I actually met with the superintendent about this when Kelly and Stephanie and I first really started looking at these hard numbers about a month and a half ago. So it's not even, my posture isn't, Kelly, the way I presented it to Region 19 was, there's a bill. This is no different than East Con bill. So because we, MBOE, I always say we, even though I'm on every side of the table, MBOE is a contractor to E.O. Smith. So therefore, it's a bill. We just need to figure out what the bill is. It was, I don't want to say news to her, but because she's very familiar with how the exercise runs with a shortfall in food service, and she understands that she needs to bear some of the burden. But it's not going to be, because it's a bill, we have to treat it and allocate it in accordance with what is actually we can allocate to E.O. Smith. We can't just say, here's the bottom line, $204,000, you're going to eat 102. We have to bill her or bill E.O. Smith as if it was any other client group based off of what they used.
I have a question.
Yes.
I actually a couple questions. At this present time, is anyone being charged for a meal, or all
No.
student meals are there's no charge for any student meals at this point, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Would we ever go back to the prior model where there were, some were, there were different levels of payment or different kinds of payment? Would we ever consider going to that? Returning to that model?
I would just, and Kelly and I have talked about when that trigger gets pulled. We still have the current climate that we're existing in. The federal government has declared that all children should eat and have a breakfast and a lunch, regardless of what communities they're in. So that way, it alleviates a lot of additional steps as it relates to trying to reconcile, offer different options, and so on and so forth to entice those different pricing schedule that you just referenced. But that's a conversation that, that needs to be had. I defer to Kelly on this. I'm thinking the board may have an opinion on that, but again, this was a reaction or the next step in a crisis situation,
Yeah,
and that
I realize
most communities took.
yeah, might be, it's months from now, that discussion. The other thing is that I did hear the Department of Agriculture is considering making all school lunches, always breakfast and lunch, no charge to any student. I did hear that that was something being tossed around, and that, but that's, you know, that's came from somebody's idea. And the other thing is, what percentage of these expenditures belong to E.O. Smith approximately?
So let me jump
Attributed to E.O. Smith.
Let me jump in, Martha, and give you a little more information to help you understand the situation. So it is true that we are participating in the free lunch opportunity, lunch and breakfast for everybody this year, but we're not serving the thousands of children that we typically would in a day, because at the start of our school year, not all of our students were in school every day. And in fact, we still have some students in the Mansfield Public Schools that are not in school. So that's the lost opportunity for revenue when kids are on their hybrid days at home. E.O. Smith's a very similar situation, but much more extreme, because they've been on a hybrid schedule all year, and they've not brought any students in except for very few, 5 days a week. And their number of remote students at one time was close to 40%. So the number of students being fed every day, which affects our reimbursement from the state, is significantly less than it would be in a typical year. So that's the first thing as we consider the options moving forward that we need to remember when we analyze this year. The other part of that is that we were required to maintain staffing levels. In other words, we were told not to lay anybody off. And so there are some days at E.O. Smith when Wednesdays, for example, they have almost no students in school, but we're paying staff on Wednesdays because we have an obligation. That was part of the executive order in Connecticut, actually. So when we have started the process of identifying how much of this $204,000 is attributed to lack of sales at EO and paying staff on days when they've been fully remote, like every Wednesday. They also did a shutdown for a couple of weeks after Thanksgiving. So Stephanie is doing that. And Charmaine, I know I saw an early report. I don't know that it was a final report, and I don't recall the number, but I'm remembering that it was a pretty significant amount of the 204,000.
Well, I haven't vetted the report. I think that there needs to be another huddle between Stephanie, Kelly, and myself. And then we'll go forward with E.O. Smith.
Even if it comes to using grant funds, we want to make sure that we're both contributing.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you so much for explaining this sort of larger context and the specific context and the hope and the faith and all of the pieces. I feel like I have a better understanding. It sounds like there's some, moving forward, hopefully this will get figured out and we won't have to.
This has been a very tense subject for a lot of my counterparts, because ironically, I know this might get old now. Mansfield Board of Ed, especially its food service program, has truly been operating in the fashion in which food service programs are designed to, which means it's self-sufficient. The fact that you had a fund balance or a reserve balance, because the Fed only requires that you have break even in that fund at the end of the fiscal year, it's very refreshing and remarkable, because a lot of other communities, they break even, especially if they're kind of communities of this demographic makeup. They break even. They don't save for a rainy day. They just have the expectation that they'll pull from operating, which is kind of tricky because a number of things can happen that a freezer shuts off over a long weekend, and then you've got all this spoilage and shrink. There's a number of things that can happen. And then you have other districts who fall short every single year because of whatever bizarre issues are happening in their food service program. So you experiencing this shortfall this year, I know feels quite, makes you a little bit anxious, and because it's foreign to Mansfield. But it is, and so it's not foreign to other organizations, and therefore those respective folks, those my counterparts in those respective districts are, raising the "we need help" flag and really applying pressure. So we're going to ride their coattails on every opportunity we get to leverage whatever benefits they get from the state.
One other question. Are we still providing food during holidays or during weekends, and also for students who are learning remotely? Can they pick up a sack lunch, or are we still reaching out like that to families?
We still have about 80 families that are picking up food. I think 80 is the number. 80 children or 80 families, but I think it's 80 families that are picking up food. They get 5 breakfasts, 5 lunches, and we are not doing weekends, and we did not do holidays. But we did learn today that they are extending this opportunity through September 30th, and we will have to do a really careful analysis to see if it's something that we can continue to support. I do want to also clarify that while we know that a significant amount of this loss this year is due to not having students in school 5 days a week, and EO has certainly had more of that than we have. In a typical year, we actually are more solvent fiscally because of the high school than we would be with just our elementary schools and middle school, due in large part to the opportunity to sell a la carte, including things like a second helping of a meal at the high school. Bigger kids, they eat more, right? So we really, if they extend this opportunity beyond September 30th, we're going to have to really do some really good financial analysis to see if it's something we can afford moving forward.
Do you think we're going to be providing meals in the summer like we did?
Like I said, we just got that notice today that will be allowed, and we now will need to do the analysis to see if we can manage that.
This may be a dumb question. COVID relief funds can go to food services, or we're just going to rely on something that's strictly about food services? If we get an influx of relief funds, can that go into our food services program?
And that's the broad language that was recently released in like the last week and a half, around being able to, that's what we all kind of grabbed onto, is that broad language that speaks to being able to support these types of programs. So it doesn't spell it out, food service, because that would be too easy. So this is what the group of school business officials are coalescing around, saying, this is how we're interpreting it, and this is how we're going to use it. So that way it's presented if someone gets challenged for it, all of us are doing the same thing, I guess is the posture that we're taking.
So I included
Because
that.
no one at the state will tell us, no, we can't use it. Now, every time somebody's contacted the state on that language, they won't say no.
I included that language on the COVID report that's in the board packet for this week under
that's
food
right.
services. So you'll see I put the exact communication language that we received. So you can take a look at that. I also want to just caution you that this is our accounting as of about halfway through the year. And we've seen in the past with food services that because of the way their inventory works, that it's not uncommon for our outlook at this time of the year to be less favorable than the outlook at the end of the year. So while I'm very concerned about their losses right now, those numbers will likely change between now and June.
And an example of what Kelly just referenced is there are actual something called commodity dollars that come in from the Fed for what we've, to reimburse. It's just part of the natural cycle. It has nothing to do with COVID or with this SSO model where we feed all kids breakfast and lunch 5 days a week. It is just part of the standard operating protocols that the State Department of Education has in place for Connecticut Child Nutrition Program. Those monies don't come in until the spring, late spring. So that's also not offsetting. And we can't project it because it's based off of what's actually spent. So it would be, an ultimate wash, but let's pretend the dollar amount was $15,000. That's adding to your 2004 right now because the Fed hasn't given me $15,000 to reimburse us for those commodities. So again, regardless of the fact that we're in SSO, those same items that Kelly just referenced should kick in late spring.
That's helpful too. It's nice to hear about, like, again, I know that's always artificial in some ways for us to be looking quarterly. I know we have to, but like it does sort of matter when we're taking a magnifying glass to what's going on.
So we're not having trouble paying our vendors, are we?
No.
All right, anything else about Cafeteria Fund? That was exciting.
I'm glad it was good for you. So again, I always look at the health insurance fund because it's budget season. And I know some folks felt like it was an eye popper, but I feel like you all got it. You understand what the projections are for next year. Again, I keep bringing up the projections for next year because it's right in our, present consciousness right now, but it's a great parallel for what's happening in the current fiscal year. The medical insurance fund, the expenditures exceeded revenues by $24,000. That's not huge. We're talking $8 million worth of claims coming and going out of that fund. 24,489 is not huge. The projected budget for fiscal year 2021 had projected $740,000 being utilized from the medical insurance fund in order to stabilize the rates. Same exercise that we did for the coming fiscal year when you all reviewed the projected 21-22 budget. So because there's a shortfall in the quarterlies is not alarming. It's expected. Okay. And then there's just a running balance of your respective student activity funds for the middle school and the elementary schools.
I have a question at the top of the page. The cost sharing money, we did get the January stipend, didn't we? The 25% in January.
I believe so.
Okay.
It hasn't been applied yet.
Yeah,
but because this is the quarterlies through December 31st.
Yeah, I know. But I just wanted to make sure we got it. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? Okay, thanks, Charmaine. Perhaps we can go on to the transportation discussion now, Kelly?
Sure. So Charmaine has been addressing the contract change that we had talked about at the last Finance Committee meeting. E.O. Smith, who's a partner in the contract with us, their Finance Committee has also looked at the contract. And I don't remember, Charmaine, if they've taken their final vote or not, and I don't know if you know that. It's been a couple of weeks since I talked to Sharon about it.
So last week was their finance committee meeting and followed by their board meeting. So it was reviewed, and again, similar to kind of what we did with MBOE in the executive session, discussed sort of the nitty gritties of the contract. It's going to go to be fully reviewed and vetted by Region 19's corporate counsel. And then meeting the language that we talked about in our executive session, language that they're, in agreement with that language, because they're trying to do both this contract that's directly impacting Mansfield Board and the other contract that impacts Willington concurrently. So they're sending both of them to the council, and once their attorneys make sure everything is right, then it should be, brought back to the superintendent, and she will reach out to Kelly to have to, fully execute the contract. If anything happens, if something shows up on the radar for their corporate counsel, then they will let us know. I will tell you one thing that did show up. I mean, it's a nit, but it in essence is important. The language that is in place for this agreement that we're talking about now doesn't make it very plain and clear the co-ownership, meaning, and the co-authorization of being able to contact M&J regarding whatever busing changes or needs that are going to impact E.O. Smith versus Mansfield Board. So that's the additional language that came from Region 19's board, that they want to make sure that it's clear that there are two signers, and that when they say board, it's either or, and so on and so forth, versus one.
So Charmaine, if their council recommends any substantial changes, then our council is going to need to take a review of it as well.
Yep, right. So that's why I said that's a bit of a nit. It's in the opening language in the agreement where it identifies who is the board, and who identifies who is the contractor, and so on and so forth. That opening language in the beginning of the contract.
Okay.
So we still got the 1.9% for 1 year. Then for 4 more years, for each of those is 3.2%. That averages out to 2.94% for 5 years. And that's what we're doing.
That has not changed.
1.99 for that first year.
Okay. Thank you.
When you're talking millions, it's a lot. I mean, it's meaningful money. So 1.99.
Okay. Any other questions? Kelly, are you?
I don't have anything else to share with you. We'll have a very full discussion probably tomorrow night or Thursday night at the board
Thursday.
related to the COVID grants. But that extends beyond the scope of the quarterlies. So.
Okay, great. All right. Is there anything else, folks? Charmaine, thank you very, very much.
Some of the expenses in here, it really exceeded a huge percentage for the year, and I assume that's COVID related.
Is there
they
a particular
exceeded 100%. Well, general services was 238% increase was used. That's on page 4.
And that includes your oops, wait a minute. Essential services, instructional support.
Yes. Yeah,
That's
6100.
again the $168,000 in expenditures.
Yes.
Is that what you're referencing?
Yeah, 238% used. Yeah.
So there, I'd have to pull the details on that, but that is, I feel like, and it's funny because I had made a note to that. Encumbrance. So you've got,
Charmaine, I believe that includes special education support, so grant
I was
funding may
gonna
not have hit that yet.
yeah, because I was gonna say that looks like it might not have had its offset.
Right. So Martha, are you familiar with that from the past? You know, how we receive funding for special education and
I don't,
it often, the grants don't hit our accounting system prior to these reports being run.
the several title.
Well,
Yeah.
this is the IDEA monies.
IDEA, that's it. IDEA, yeah.
Yeah.
And I assume on page 11, system support at the bottom of the page, that's 679%. That's 55423. I assume that's a extra COVID impact.
Likely, again, I'd have to pull that, but that's an expenditure of only $3,300 when $500 was,
Yeah, it's not that much money, but I think this is probably a COVID related issue. And see through really quickly.
And so the COVID, it's also on that page, the biggest catch-all bucket. As of the December 31st, again, this is when these quarterlies were done. This is a snapshot in time for those 3 months. The journal entries to migrate the dollars to cover these expenditures. So what happens is you have the expenditures, anything that's covered by a grant and gets drawn down by finance to go against and get applied to those expenditures. But once these expenditures have to exist, and then there's a window of time that the state opens up and says, you can go in during this window to pull down based off of what you've spent. They've gotten a little bit more strict because in the past, you could just go in and pull down as much money as you wanted if you had an expectation that you were going to spend it. So now they've cracked down and they require us to do sort of a quarterly report that shows what was actually spent, because it's a reimbursement. It's not front funding or up funding of these expenditures. So when you get your next quarterly, you'll see that line will be very different than it is today. This is, again, since Martha brought us to page 11, because those journal entries, because now that we have the funding, will be applied against those respective account lines, and they have, those respective expenditures, those eligible expenditures, and then it'll be reduced. Again, it goes back to, the example that she just shared regarding the IDEA grant. They have not, that grant or that money, that credit hasn't offset because it hasn't been applied yet.
Yeah. Well, I noted that you had a COVID expense cost center. And so I'm sure we'll be seeing more to do with 54,929 in the future. More expensive.
Fun account.
Yeah.
Anything else? All right, again, thank you, Charmaine. Thank you, Kelly. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I will move to adjourn.
And I will second it.
Ladies.
Thank you, everyone, for explaining.
Thank you, ladies.
13.
Thanks,
Good night, everyone.
See you
Thank you.
Thursday.
Yes, Thursday. Thank
Good
you.
one.
Thank you.
Night.